Hi, kids. Whoo! Just got done working out, and man, I was really increasing my entropy. Guess what we're gonna learn about entropy. Really, when you do work out, that's what you're doing. You are increasing your entropy. Why is that? Because you're taking your chemical energy, which is really this usable energy that you can do work with, and you're turning it into heat. And you can't really like do any work with that heat. You just got hot, and it's just unusable, and that increases the entropy, which is what we're talking about today. So let's talk about entropy. Entropy, one definition that you're going to see, which I'm going to avoid using. So actually, I'm not even going to say it. I'm going to say it this way. Entropy is a measure of randomness of a system. Okay, so the more random a system is, the more entropy it has. My son likes to take toys out and just leave them all over the place. So, like, he is increasing the entropy of my basement because there's a lot of random stuff everywhere in my basement. Or if you want, another way you can think of it is if I take a plate and I drop it, well, the plate shatters, and that would increase the entropy of the plate because there's a lot of random stuff all over the place as opposed to this plate, which is, nice one piece of plate, and it's very random otherwise. Or if you want, you could think of like an ice cube melting. If I have an ice cube, there's my beautiful ice cube. And then it melts into some water, and then if I was to keep heating it up and it turns into a gas, that's my picture of a gas. This would have the lowest entropy. Why? Because it's the least random. The molecules are all in a line. This would have more entropy than this because the molecules are a lot more random. And this would have more entropy than that because the molecules are even more random. So entropy, you can think of it as a measure of randomness. Another way is just going back to a picture that you guys have already seen before. Do you guys remember this picture where you have the number of molecules and speed? And if I have a picture that looks like this versus a picture that looks like this, if this is oxygen and one of these is at 100 Kelvin, one's at 300 Kelvin, hopefully you'll be smart enough to go, hey, that's the 100 Kelvin one. Hey, that's the 300 Kelvin one. Hey, take a second to pause it. Pause. Well, actually, listen first, and then you got to pause. Sorry. You don't even know what I'm asking you to do. If you look at this, figure out which one, the one that's at 100 Kelvin or the one that's at 300 Kelvin, which one has a higher entropy? Okay, pause it and think. Okay, good, you paused it. Great job. And hopefully you decided this one has a higher entropy. Yes, because if you think about the molecules, those molecules are going to be a lot more random in there, where these are going to be a lot more, similar, less random. So lower entropy, higher entropy. How we doing? All right. Let's talk about a different way you can think about entropy, because sometimes just randomness by itself is not a great way of thinking about it. So here's a different way we can think about entropy. You could think of entropy as measuring, I just want to read exactly so I can do this right. It's a variable that shows the direction of time. All right, so here's what I mean. So let's go back to, sorry, that's direction. There's a bad glare there. Sorry about that. There's a glare in my head. But here's what I mean by this. It shows the direction of time. If I filmed something, you guys already watched this with the reversible and irreversible movie, but if I had a plate and I dropped it, okay, and I filmed that, it would be really obvious which way is the correct order of time, okay? So that, it's a variable, it shows the order of time. If you saw all these random pieces come back together into a plate, well, you would go, yeah, that's played in reverse. And you know that because the plate that shatters has a higher entropy. So that over time, a system always increases its entropy. So, and actually, that's going to be actually second law of thermodynamics. So let's write that down. Second law of thermodynamics is that in an isolated system, the entropy always stays the same or increases. It never goes down. So, if my system is the plate and I was to drop that plate when it shatters, those random pieces are never just going to magically come back together and get a plate. Or if you even my example with the water and the ice, that if the ice melts, if I have an ice cube and it melts into water, well, that has more entropy. Like that water, even if I freeze that water again, it's not going to magically form back into a cube. Okay, it's just going to form into a layer of ice. It's, so that you can tell the direction of time with that. An isolated system the entropy will always stay the same, or it's always going to go up. That's the second law of thermodynamics. All right, so let's do it in terms of this. If I have hot and cold, remember this is our zeroth law, otherwise I like to call it the duh law, that my heat is going to flow that way, and heat will keep flowing that way until you end up with warm and warm. Okay? That if you take a look, if you start with this, after a long time, you're going to get this. That's telling you the direction of time. This has more entropy than this. Okay? I could never, ever start with the thing that's just hey, I have two things that are the same temperature, and then just randomly, one is going to get hotter and one's going to get colder. That's not going to happen. It's going to go from here to here, never from here to here in an isolated system. I could force it to do that, but that would not be an isolated system. So again, this is showing the direction of time. This also goes back to, let me do the whole isolated system, with an ice cube. You could think, well, geez, I can take water and put it in my freezer and it freezes. So isn't that water's entropy going down? And the answer is yes, it is going down. But the entropy of the whole system, that would not be an isolated system because you're taking energy away from it, and you're putting it into the back of your refrigerator. If you feel the back of your refrigerator, it's hot. It's dumping heat out of there. So that the system, if I include the surroundings in my system, well, you know what? It's doing this. It's getting more entropy. Okay, so an isolated system is never going to lower its entropy by itself. Okay, so here's the third way that you could think of entropy if it helps you. You can think of entropy as a measure of usable energy, so that let me just make sure that entropy, or let me just do it this way. Usable energy has less entropy than unusable energy. Okay, and let me just give you some examples with this. Okay, if you want, we could do I erased it, but here, let's go back to our hot, cold, and then warm. Really, if, like, this is completely isolated, so my system is this, and there's nothing else around, the heat's going to flow this way, and it's eventually going to get to here, and the energy, total energy here and here is the same, but do you see how this is usable energy? This is not usable energy. Like, I can't put an engine between two warm things and run an engine from the heat flowing, because it's not going to happen. But I could put an engine between something that's hot and cold. This would be low entropy system. This would be a high entropy system. Okay, in fact, they'll say like this system where you're in thermal equilibrium, that's the highest entropy you could have. Okay, but does everybody follow that? All right, another example that you guys should know from AP Physics 1 is, hey, you know what? I have a car, and my car is moving along, and it slams on its brakes. So I start with kinetic energy, and I end up with heat energy. So all of this kinetic energy gets turned into heat. Well, you know what? Okay, if all of this kinetic energy gets turned into heat, this is usable energy. I can use that to do work. Well, this heat is not usable energy. It's just heating up the surroundings. You can't gather that up and do work with it. So like, this would be low entropy. This would be higher entropy. So entropy, you can think of it kind of 3 different ways, and it'll work no matter what subject you pick. But if it helps, if it helps to think of a certain time as, hey, I want to think about it this way, use it. This way, use it. This way, use it. All right. Bye, kids.